Okay, hello everybody, and welcome. Oh, I'm David Butler.
I'm Emily Freeman.
Welcome to Don't Miss This. This is Don't Miss This. Okay, today, this is a little bit tricky because we're doing, we'll tell you the title and we'll show you how to find the other later. But Joseph Smith Matthew 1 and Matthew 24, Matthew 25, Luke 21, Mark 12, Mark 13. 2 weeks in a row, we did the whole Bible.
Yes.
We'll talk about this Joseph Smith Matthew business in just a second. But we want to start off with this story of Jesus in the temple that we just can't skip, or it'll be a sin. So, this is the best version of it is in Mark chapter 12, starting in verse 41. And I don't know if you were with us last week. You remember Jesus when he comes in for his last week in Jerusalem. It's a festival week, which means hundreds and thousands of people are there for Passover. And so the outer court of the temple is just packed with people. And Jesus is there, and he's been teaching and spending time in the temple all day. And then this little scene happens at the end of Mark chapter 12 with a certain poor widow. And this started in verse 41. And Jesus was over against the treasury. Now, in a couple of the corners of the outer court was the treasury for the temple, where people would come in and give a tithing, essentially, a temple tax that they would pay to help, work at the work of the temple. And what they had are these giant, like trumpet-shaped metal things, and that is where you would put your money into them. And so what you have is all these people, it says, casting much money into the treasury, and many that were rich.
You'd be able to hear it, right?
Absolutely. So here in this temple, you would have had most of the coins were made out of metal, and they were also metal. And so if you wanted to make a scene about you paying money to the temple, that would have been easy. Because you could have just sat there and just clank, 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 clank.
It's making me think of that green machine at Smith's where you dump
out
all your spare change.
I hate when people do that. I'm just like, oh, sorry if you do it. But it's seriously, it's so loud. It's just like, oh my gosh, and I want their money. But just throwing that in to the thing. And then there came a certain poor widow. And she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing, which is such a small amount of money, less than a penny's worth of money. And they were kind of made out of stone. And they're just like, they're smaller than like a dime. They're just the littlest things. And would have thrown those in. Now, what I love about this story is in verse 43, he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto him, that this poor widow cast in more. She of all her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. That he noticed about her that she gave all. And what's interesting is for her, that was just 2 mites. Mm-hmm. Her whole heart and soul and might equaled 2 mites. But I love that. Imagine in your mind this temple that is filled with people to the brim from foreign countries. So there's language and yabbering, and there's animals bellowing, and there's just the clank, 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 clank of the tithing trumpets, that are just going and going and going and going. And this little lady would have just moved her way all the way through, right? And put in 2 little stone mites that would have made no noise. And I love in the chaos of that entire temple, she would have been overlooked. But Jesus sees her. And not even his disciples knew what she was giving. Only he knew.
In the Bible video that
everyone has to watch that Bible video.
He kind of wants to make sure they don't miss what's about to happen in that moment. I love that so much. And they're all watching it. It is just her private moment. We don't even know if she ever finds out that he knew she put in the 2 mites, right? It's something he watches over, but she probably never even knows that took place. And I love when you read it and it tells you for all of these people cast in of their abundance, right? They brought what was extra. They brought their excess. And then I love when it says, but she of her want, and if you look up the Greek translation for that word want, it means a falling short. Which is such an interesting description because she of her falling short, because of everywhere where she wasn't enough, where everyone else was like too much and more than enough. But this woman, because of where she wasn't enough, gave everything she had.
Yeah.
And it was all her living. It was everything she had. She gave to the temple, and probably knowing the blessings that were going to come back to her through that. And I wonder how many of us relate to this woman. How many of us can think of that place where we are falling short? And when we look at what we have to offer into that place, it's not very much. Maybe we don't even feel like it's our best, but it's just simply, it's all we have.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he accepts that. And not only does he accept it, but like he takes note of it. He makes mention of those things that we think are maybe our smallest offering are some of our best in his eyes.
Yeah, and not only takes note of it, but wants his disciples to see it. Like calls them over. It's like, I want you all to see what discipleship looks like. A couple Christmases ago, I found this painting of The Widow by Annie Henry. And I love it because it's actually a young mother and she's holding a baby, because we don't know how old this lady is. Like we always think that she's this old lady, and the Bible videos, you just have to watch it because it really is the cutest old lady that ever came to the world, except for my own grandma. And maybe she was this older widow. But I love the idea of this young mother, and she's got this baby in her arms, in this painting. And I gave it to Jenny a couple of years ago because Jenny was just in the thick of young motherhood. And if she would have described what she felt like her life was like, she would have said, I feel like I'm in want, or I'm not giving enough to, what our house needs, what the kids need and everything. And I wanted to give that to her to let her know that, man, at 1 o'clock in the morning when you feel like you don't have enough to give, or I don't know how to help Jack with his math, or I don't know how to, raise Christian the right way. I was like, even Jesus's disciples won't notice what it is that you are giving, but he definitely does. And he accepts it as if it were, this grundle of money from others. Like what you have to give.
Even in the moments when you think you're falling short.
He accepts it, right? Yeah. The primary teachers who are in the room, and there's like, the bishop doesn't know what's happening. That's right, he doesn't. He really doesn't. But God knows what it is that you're giving, and what you're giving is your heart. It's a lack. It's never enough. You always want to give more. That's always, everybody I was down at women's conference today. Well, this is going to be a couple weeks later, and I saw Laurel Day's, her talk was called that You Are Enough. And
she's so good at teaching about
my gosh, and it's going to be the most popular class there because that is what everybody feels. Like, I'm not enough. And this story says, like, oh, you're right. You will give in your lack, but you should know that it is enough for him. You've given your heart. And that's what he always, wanted.
So good. So it's such a good story.
That is a great story. And we'll put a link to Annie Henry's painting because now everybody wants a copy of it in their house.
Yes, they do.
I just gave all y'all a Christmas present idea. You're welcome.
Wait,
okay.
It's not even close to Christmas.
Well,
and it's probably past Mother's Day. We don't know.
Oh, by the time this comes out. Yeah. Okay, well, maybe August.
Okay,
things.
Fun. Every mom wants an August present. Good idea.
Okay, let's talk about this Matthew business. Okay, so Matthew 24 is the same as Joseph Smith Matthew 1. So Joseph Smith Matthew 1 is a Joseph Smith translation of Matthew chapter 24.
And let's say where to find it.
Yeah.
Okay, someone has never been there before. It's going to be in the Pearl of Great Price. You're going to go past Moses, past Abraham.
Then you'll hit it.
And then you're going to hit it right after that. Joseph Smith Matthew is what it's called at the intro, but it's called JSM 1 also. So it's a little tricky, but that is where it is. Joseph Smith, Matthew 24 is the signs of the times. Jesus is gathering his apostles. They want to ask what the signs of the second coming are going to be, and he just lays the whole thing out.
And who loves that they ask, when are you coming back before he ever leaves? That's how you know they like him.
Yes,
if you're in your grandma's house and you're like, and the kids are like, when are we coming back before you ever leave? You should take that as a compliment to your grandma.
So true.
They want to know, when are you coming back? And he says, here are the things to watch for.
Yep. And meanwhile, I said we should have just done one whole thing on Joseph Smith Matthew because I love it so much. Everyone, I love it. Let me just say this. If in heaven you got to line up for the era you wanted to come to, have we ever talked about this?
Yes,
There's
because
only
I think
two
we're the same.
I would have chosen. Either, so just pretend we got to pick when we came. I think we did, maybe. Either I would have been a pioneer.
Oh my gosh.
I would have. I love the pioneers so much. I would have
You
chosen.
have not read enough stories about crossing Nebraska or Iowa.
I wanted to do all that with my kids. Or live to see the second coming.
I can't believe you wanted to be a pioneer yet. I still am in my head. I can't
I wanted to be a pioneer.
No one ever talks about screaming kids on the pioneer trek, and that is I can't even keep them in my van.
They were so happy. There were no seatbelts. There were no car seats.
I don't keep. I do everyone. I don't want the emails.
Okay, listen. Since I wasn't a pioneer.
Okay.
I'm hoping
that you're
it
here
might
for
be the second coming.
Well, President Nelson told us in conference it's like tomorrow. I felt like
so this is something you for sure want to read, and just go through. Should we just give them some hints? Like you want to know the beginning of it. We are. Let's
okay.
The beginning of it actually
is.
From 1 to 21 is 70 AD. Okay, that's before. That's things that happened before. You're going to want to watch for a parallel that will happen again.
So they've already happened.
They already
happened. 1 through 21 haven't happened for the disciples, but their history for us.
For us. Yeah. Good explaining. They hadn't happened yet for them. None of it had happened for them. So he's giving them two things. For us, when you read 1 through 21, that happened already. So just read, but you're watching for what happened because he's going to tell us, and again, it's going to happen. You're going to watch it again. So you want to watch what happened then. And then starting in 22 is where we're going to see our signs of the times. We pulled out just a couple that we love. And I told David, I'm just going to put one little extra in the newsletter because there's so many good ones in here. So in the newsletter, look for the abomination of desolation. I can't resist. But the other one that I love in here, it tells us twice to watch because the very powers of heaven shall be shaken. I've always wondered what that meant, that word shaken, and you see it 2 times in here. And there's a couple places you want to go. I'll say them here, but we'll also put them in the newsletter. So if you get the newsletter, you'll have them. But if not, Doctrine and Covenants 21:6, Doctrine and Covenants 35:24.
And you have exclamation points.
That's my favorite one, 21:6. Doctrine and Covenants 29:14, Doctrine and Covenants 84:119. There's just one more, 121, 33 through 36. Sometimes it's just fun to gather scriptures that give you more insight, especially into things that you're like, well, what does that, like, what would that mean? So if you can find other places where that word was used and start piecing them together, it kind of helps you expand your thoughts on, oh, this is probably what this is talking about. So that's a fun study to do.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about?
Okay. My sign of the time that I am most interested in, I wouldn't call it my favorite. The one I'm most interested in is actually not in Matthew 24. So a good companion chapter to Matthew 24 is Doctrine and Covenants 45. So we'll go over this in 2 years.
So hopefully the second coming is not in 2 years.
I just committed ourselves to this.
If the second coming is before 2 years, it's his fault for not letting us talk about it.
Well, I'm about to tell you. Plus the book of Revelation is a good, another book to look for. Listen, we just left a box on here for signs of his coming that you can do whatever you want. Something that might be fun is to make a list of them and talk together. It's like, is this something we think has been fulfilled? Or, what might this mean? But this is when it's in section 45, which is a great companion section to Matthew 24. And he says, and in that day, you've heard this first part a lot, there shall be heard of wars and rumors of wars, and the whole earth shall be in commotion. And men's hearts shall fail them. And people will say that Christ delayeth his coming. And it's one I think a lot about just the whole world being in commotion to the spot where people's hearts are failing them. And that is something I feel like I am on watch for all the time, is I don't want people's hearts to fail them. And what can I do to prevent that from happening? And you can just hear, you can read in this, and where people are saying he's delaying his coming. I think the temptation, like we see in 3 Nephi chapter 1, where people are like, he's not coming back. Like, it's a fairy tale. Like, things will just get to that point where people are like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, and that, man, the idea of people's hearts failing them just really, really gets to me. And also, I wanted to bring that one up because the next chapter, Matthew 25, so Jesus is going to go through and everyone's like, when are you coming back? And then he tells them all these things that are not happy signs,
Yes.
Like, him coming is very, very happy. And he actually tells them, be really happy when you see wars and rumors of wars, because it means I'm right around the corner, But I think it was Elder Maxwell who said, like, even to the faithful that are warmed by the fire of faith, these things cause you to shudder. Some of these things that you read. Matthew 25. So Matthew 24 is everything that you can expect before his coming.
What to watch for.
What to watch
kind
for.
Of the signs.
Matthew 25 are 3 parables of preparation. So they go together with Matthew 24. Remember, we always say, like, what spurred the parable? Well, in this one, what spurs? What inspires these parables are, how do I prepare my heart for the things in Matthew 24? He's coming again. So how do I get myself ready for that coming? So 3 parables of preparation in Matthew 25. The 10 virgins, the parable of the talents, and the parable of the sheep and the goats. So we have just left 3 boxes, if you use the study guide sheet, to just like fill in the notes and impressions and thoughts that you have about each of these. And we'll just say a couple of thoughts about each one.
The 10 virgins we'll go through fast. It's the one we talk about the most often when we go to DNC 25. DNC, now you've got me in the Doctrine and Covenants by accident. Matthew 25. And so we'll just go through and maybe point out some of our favorite parts. But there were 10 virgins. They took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And I think one thing that is important is right at the very beginning, that they all accepted the invitation. And they all had a lamp. And they all arrived at the place they were supposed to be on time. And President Kimball tells us this is not 5 people who loved Christ and 5 who didn't, or 5 people who were religious in their life and 5 who weren't. This is 10 people who knew who the bridegroom was, who had been invited to the wedding, who knew to bring a lamp and had showed up. In those days, to bring a lamp, it was common for a couple to invite their very best friends to come and wait. And because there was no electricity, because there was no lights, when the call was made that the bridegroom was coming, they would light their lamps, because usually it was dark by that time of night when the wedding was going to start. They would light their lamps and stand by the door and bring light in honor of the bridegroom and all of his family who would come in the door. So these were women who were close to the bridegroom, and I think it's important for us to remember that those women
specifically
represent all
invited,
us.
right? All 10 people were people who would have loved him and were anxious for him to come, and who is going to honor him when he gets there, and who's going to be ready for this great, celebration. What's happening while they're waiting is the 2 families are negotiating. So the bridegroom is actually negotiating, the dowry and everything for the bride. Is she an 8-cow wife or whatever, So the fact that it's taking a long time means that this is a very valuable bride in the eyes of everybody. And so it's interesting in this parable is you and I play the role of the 10 virgins waiting, but we actually are also the bride, because that's our role also symbolically, as Jesus is the bridegroom and we are the church. The church is
or the bride.
Is the bride. So right off the very bat, there's kind of a compliment that you are very, very valuable in his eyes, and he is spending a long time in this negotiation because of how much he values the bride.
And the difference here is there's only one difference in these 10, and it is some brought oil with them and some didn't.
Right.
And the evening starts and it gets going. And also another thing that is common among all of them is they all fall asleep, right?
Yeah.
You watch this pattern of everyone is doing all the same things. And then the cry is made, the bridegroom is here, you have to trim those lamps and get them ready. And that process is so important because if you don't trim that wick, those lamps won't burn. So it is this process of getting back down to the clean part of the wick, getting rid of everything that is old, and then you fill your lamp up, and then you light your lamp. But 5 of them don't have oil. And we remember they can't share their oil. In the Doctrine and Covenants, we read that oil has to do with the Spirit. It has to do with...
Yeah, we put that little cross-reference there so that you can see that.
With those things that as much as you want to share, that you just can't share. A lot of times when I'm teaching seminary, I'll tell my kids, I can read the Book of Mormon and have a testimony of it, but I cannot give you my testimony of the Book of Mormon. You have to experience it for yourself. I can tell you all day long how much I love the Book of Mormon. But if you want to love the Book of Mormon, you're going to have to read it. And the same is true for paying tithing. I can tell you my testimony of tithing, but until you've tried it for yourself, you won't have that same oil reserve of that. And
remember that the whole intention of our life on earth is who we become, right? So we can give some things away, but we can't give away who I've become through my experiences. Because you read this the first time and you're like, come on, sisters.
Did no one teach you about charity?
Give said the little stream and share the oil. But like, I cannot share, that. So that might be a great activity to kind of talk about. What kind of things can we share with others? And what kind of things are we just unable to, right? Because the 5 are just unable to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's important. It wasn't that they didn't love them, they didn't care for them, or they didn't feel like they should be there. It was that they couldn't. That was something everyone had to obtain for themselves. And the same is true today. As we're looking at building up what we know about Jesus Christ, that's something that happens through personal one-on-one experience with him. And we have to open our heart and be daring enough for some of us to engage in that relationship. That's what has to happen. So it's interesting because when they go to buy, the bridegroom comes, and they that were ready go in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. And afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered, in Matthew 25, he says, verily I say unto you, I know you not. I love that Joseph Smith changed that translation to say, you know me not. It's just such a different way of reading that and realizing that even though they had been invited to the wedding, the part of the process they were missing was the coming to know Jesus.
Yeah.
And that was the important part, that they weren't strangers to him when he came. And for each of us is important to look at and just think, what am I doing to improve my relationship with Jesus Christ? And how am I coming to know him better? Because that becomes our reserve.
Right. And that oil in that reference, talking about they took the Holy Spirit to be their guide. That they had those personal experiences where they came to know him. It's interesting, like from the outside, you would look at all 10 of them and you would never know if their lamps were filled or whether their lamps were empty or not, because they look like disciples, but have they really come to know him, or do they just look the part?
Yeah, and there's just something about those reserves. That it's just that thought of that depth and the reserve that you've gathered and gained, that becomes important.
So it's not a checklist. That's super, super important, that we're not saying like, who's ready for the second coming? Oh, it's people who pay their tithing, and it's people who read the scriptures, and it's like, well, no. Who knows him? Who has come to know him? And
how have you come?
Right.
And
those
some
things
may
might
say,
be, right, that's how I came to know him.
Because I read the Book of Mormon and it led me closer to Christ, or those are things that lead us to know him, but it's just coming.
Right. Remember in John 17:3, he says, this is life eternal, that you know me and the Father.
Yep.
Okay, that's such a great parable. A lot of great discussion can happen with that one. Okay, the next one, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man who goes into a far country and gives kind of control over his business to 3 of his servants, right? And
he's gone, and he's going to be gone.
And while I'm gone, right?
Take care
so
of this.
It's interesting because Jesus, remember, when he comes, he initiates the kingdom of God. And it's not until he returns that there will be that full consummation of the kingdom of God, right? Where the kingdom of God will be fully on the earth, right? Because Jesus starts it when he comes in the meridian of time. And then it's not until the millennial day that it's like full swing, right? So it's kind of a parable about that I've come, initiated it, and I've handed it over to my servants while I'm gone temporarily, right? And to his servants, one he gives 5 talents, another 2, and then to another 1. Now, a talent it's hard to do money, but a talent is about $1.2 million in worth. So he's not, these are not like the floor sweepers, the servants. Like these are like ones that he really, really trusts. So even to the one that were like, he gave him one talent, he gave him $1.2 million to invest and to, and to take care of, and then to another 2 and to another 5, right? So we ought to know that these are highly, highly trusted servants. This is a very, very, whatever he's handing over to all 3 of them is very, very valuable to him, and he's handed it over. One thing I think it's important when we tell this parable, as we talk about it in groups and families, is sometimes I call it the parable of the monies instead of the talents, because we quickly want to interpret it as your talents, like playing the piano or something like that. Right. And so to not go there, you might want to say like, okay, this is a parable about money. This is a parable about his treasures. Mm-hmm. It's a parable about his wealth, and he's handing over his treasure and his wealth to these people. Okay, so for those who don't know the story, when he comes back again, the guy who was given the 5 monies now has 10 monies. Okay, and he's invested it, and now it's 10. And the guy who had 2, right? He comes to reckon, to give an accounting, and homeboy's made 4. Okay, right? So he's like, so notice double.
Yeah, they both increase the same amount,
right,
equally. Both
and
have the same increase.
What he says to both of them is, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." So the praise is the same for both, to the guy who moved 5 to 10, and the guy who moved 2 to 4. Mm-hmm. Right? Same praise, same acceptance. Right? Then the third guy, he comes and he says, "Well, I buried it. I digged in the earth.
I digged it,
and I hid the Lord's money." And when he comes to him, right, he says, "That's what I did, and I got nothing."
So I've read the parable the same way as he has, switching it for money, and even still in my mind, I'm like, I just don't get it. These 2 were good businessmen, but what if the last guy wasn't? And then he was like, well, this will be smart. I'll just put it in savings, right? I feel like that is just as good. He just put it in the ground. It was still there when he came back. And one day, Greg and I were talking about it, and he was like, I don't think we understand this parable. Like, I keep having a feeling we don't understand this parable. And I'm like, okay, let's look at it from your point of view then. Let's try and figure it out from your point of view. So we started out, and it said, the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And I was like, okay, if you were going to call your servants, who would it be? And he named off all of our kids. And I said, okay, and what are your goods going to be? And if you know Greg well, it's his chickens. That is his best thing, is his chickens. So I'm like, all right, let's see how this works out, okay? So you come in, you bring him in, you've got Josh, and you've got Megan, and you've got Grace, okay? There's everybody who's there. And you're going to give Josh 5 chickens, okay? He's got to take care, you're leaving. Josh is going to take care of 5 chickens. And Megan's going to take care of 2 chickens. And Grace is going to take care of 1 chicken. You love that it was Grace, don't you? You all wish you knew Grace. So Caleb takes his,
Grace, Josh, are you watching this? We miss you.
She's on her mission. Josh takes his 5 chickens, and what are the chickens going to do while Greg's gone if Josh takes care of them?
How are multiply.
Yeah, right? They're going to increase.
Yeah.
They're going to increase. There's going to be an increase of eggs, and then there's going to be an increase of chickens, and there is going to be an increase by the time it's over. And Megan takes her 2 chickens, and she feeds them, and she waters them while Greg's gone. And when he gets back, there is an increase, right? They've had eggs, and Grace takes her chicken, and what does she do?
She buries it. Like, what if?
She buries it. Greg's favorite chicken. Just pretend it's his favorite one. She buries it. Okay, it's gone for like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So he comes back. Josh is like, look what happened. These 5 chickens had this many eggs. This is the increase.
Yeah.
And Greg's
well done.
Well done. You did so good with the chickens. And Megan comes, and here's these 2 chickens, and here's their increase. And good job. And he puts them all in their little cage that he's built them, and they all go back and live happily. And then he says, Grace. And Grace goes, it's been 2 weeks. She digs up her chicken, brings it in. It's still a chicken.
True. But it is a dead one.
Okay, see the problem? All of a sudden you see the problem when it becomes chickens. Mm-hmm. Because that chicken, not only did it not have any increase, is it ever going to?
No. It is dead.
It'd been better if Grace had taken her chicken over to Tasha's house.
And just,
Instead,
let somebody else take care of it.
Let someone else take care of it. And as we were reading through, I'm like, hold on. This is not a parable about talents or about money. This is a parable about people.
Right. Because if you want to ask, fill in the blank, what is God's greatest treasure?
What's his goods?
What is he most interested in? And what would he choose his most trusted servants to take care of? Right? And that is his children. It's people.
It's people.
Right?
And he's going to give you 5, and he's going to give me 2, and he's going to give Grace 1. Right? And he's going to say, you take these and you water them and you feed them and
bring about their increase.
Yes, and you bring about their increase.
Their character and their happiness. And I need you to take care of these things. Help them to grow. Help them to, to change. Like, just look out for them and look after them.
Say what you were saying.
No, I was just going to say that, like, we were talking a little bit earlier about sometimes there's people who have a really wide reach, right? Like, we've got a ton of people watching, these videos, and that's awesome. But that's not our ministry. Like, this is our, like, service and our gift, but it's not our ministry. Like, it comes in those 5 or 2 or 1 people that God gives over to us in our lives. And he's like, I want you to take care of this person. Like, this is your person to look after in their life. And that is where all the good in God's kingdom happens, is on one-on-one ministry.
And it's so interesting because when he goes to that one and says, what happened here? And you're going to start seeing a pattern that is, of all these parables, this is going to be the most important pattern. So be watching as this happens. He says to him, what happened with the one? And then he which had received the 1 talent in verse 24 came and said, Lord, I knew thee, that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, where there thou hast, that is thine. Here's the interesting part. Does that sound like Jesus? And what you realize is, same problem as the 5 foolish virgins. Did the man know Christ?
Yeah, great.
At
That's
the
such
end,
a great connection.
Again, we have that same thing happening where he's like, I knew you. And then he describes who Jesus Christ is not.
Yeah.
And in the end, what was the problem? Wasn't the 5, the 2, or the 1. The problem was, again, and the message of the parable is, you didn't come to know me and how I minister and how I take care of it. And when I give you something, what my hope is, for that, and why I hope for it.
Oh, there's so much more that's in there that we could think about, which is so, like, you're just like, why does he respond that way at the very end?
Yeah.
What a great discussion.
Okay, then we go to the third one.
Which is the best one.
Yeah,
okay,
so
this is what makes this third one really unique. Is it starts in 31 and says, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, and when he sits down upon the throne, and gathers all the nations together, he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divided the sheep from the goats, and some to the right hand and some to the left, right? So what you are happening here is a painting of Judgment Day, right? So that is what, when Jesus comes again and all the scenes are wrapped up, he was going to make a division, right? So this is, we don't know what Judgment Day looks like, but this is how it's being described in parable form, is like this. And this is the only time in Scripture that I can find where it is described what Jesus will account for on Judgment Day. Like, what are the questions?
Mm-hmm.
What is actually going to be on his mind for what he's going to call, who are my sheep on my right hand and who are the goats? Goats are like rebellious and by nature, like an independent and don't listen to their shepherds.
If you love goats, don't worry. You just go ahead and keep loving them.
Yeah, sorry, but that's just kind of what they're like, and that's why he says sheep and goats. Like, sheep are those who actually want to be near the shepherd, and he's like, let me tell you the difference between those who want to run from me and those who want to stay with me. Those who are on my right hand, the sheep, and the goats on the left. And he says to the ones on his right hand, right? Come, you blessed of my Father, and inherit the kingdom that was prepared for you from the foundation of the world, right? Come and rule and reign together with me. And here's the description. For I was hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. And then the righteous will say unto him, Lord, when did we see you hungered or thirsty and fed you? When did we see you a stranger? When did we see you sick or in prison? And then this great verse in verse 40, the answer, and the king will answer and say, inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. That is the only description of what the Lord is looking for on Judgment Day. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, by the way that you love others. Right? I just imagine Judgment Day being a day where God calls all people together, and he doesn't care about whether they had the right doctrines or whether they believe things exactly right. Like, I just feel like, if he gathers together this group of this religious faith and says, okay, you were off a little bit doctrinally, but watch how easily I can fix that in 2 seconds, right? I can tell you what is actually true in 2 seconds. Or this group over here, or even members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he might gather them and say, like, look, you were kind of off doctrinally on this, and this, and what you were teaching in your Sunday school, or on Don't Miss This, But watch how quickly I can change that. But the real question is, did you love people well? Right? Like, all these other things I don't care about.
He can fix. He can set them straight. He can get it. And just the way he does now, right? As he's slowly leading along and helping us try and get things right.
Yeah, we're just going to, that's okay.
But as long as you're loving along the way, the rest can be worked out.
And he even says it in that verse 40. Inasmuch as you did it unto one of the least. And I just want you to imagine in your mind who that is. Mm-hmm. Who are those that are considered the least in our communities and in our countries, or in this world? Who are those that everybody else might call the least? Mm-hmm. And he says, I took it personally the way you treated those people. They are so near, and they are my treasures. And the way that you treated them, I took that very, very personally. And you loved well. And thank you for taking care of them while I was gone. Thank you for feeding and
clothing and caring and healing and all those things. And I think it's interesting because we're going to come full circle with this one again, just the way we did with the 10 virgins and the way we did with the chickens. You come here because remember when he says to the goats, the ones on the other side, he says, I was a hungered and you gave me no meat, and I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you took me not in, naked and you clothed me not, sick and in prison ye visited me not. And then they will say, Lord, when did we see you any of these things? And he will answer that same thing, as even if you did it not, then you did it not to me. And again, it is going to come back to that thing. How well did you know me? How well did you know how to serve because of how you knew me? And it's interesting that in both of those they were like, wait, when did we see you a stranger? Yeah. But it didn't matter because their knowledge of what would Jesus do allowed them to do what needed to be done. And their lack of knowledge of what Jesus would do is what didn't allow what needed to happen to be done. And so as you read through 25, there's great principles in the parables, right? The one teaches us about having the Holy Ghost with us. The one teaches us about the power of ministering. The one teaches us about the power of seeing people as if they were, what would Jesus do in that situation? You see that. But at the end of the day, all three testify of the importance of coming to know Jesus Christ. And our greatest preparation for the second coming is that why? Because he tells us so he won't come unrecognizable to us. So when he appears, we will know him, because that's what we spent our entire life trying to do.
Right. And I just feel like, and how do you come to know him? By serving shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand with him. that is how a person comes to know him, is being in the places in this world where he would be. And he would be out seeking the lost, and he would be in the prisons, and he would be at the table of the hungry. And it's like, so if I'm there in the prison,
there's a good chance
I'm going to get to know him, because that's exactly where he's going to be. Did I tell that story about Jackson and his teacher?
No.
His preschool teacher. Maybe we'll just end on this. One more parable. Jackson, my oldest, is just like everybody is, like, he was our first, and so we were extra, like, careful as parents. But also, like, Jackson just had a personality that was a little bit unique, and like all parents, like, I know how to take care of him when he's sad, and I know how to cheer him up, and I know what he's afraid of, and I know how to protect him, like, and he's just really particular in all those things. So I remember being petrified. It's usually the mom's job to be really scared when you send off a kid, and the dad's like, get on, boy, send a kid off to preschool. And we sent him off, and I was really, really nervous to send him off because he's my treasure, and I was nervous to put him into the hands of somebody else. Like, I don't know if they're going to love him the way I know how to love him, and take care of him the way that I know how to take care of him, and I remember, he went, and he was fine. He kept coming back every time, alive, and happy. And at the end of the year, they did their little thing at the program.
I love the program so
where
much,
they just, wear the little candy hats or whatever, the graduation hats or whatever, candy hats.
Maybe
like, I think I had candy or whatever. They're at the program, and we're there at the park, and, they go through all the songs and everything, and it's cute. And then when we're about to go, Jack wanted to go say goodbye, and Jack was a super shy kid. So the fact that he, like, ran over to Miss Denise, it was the name of his preschool teacher. He ran over to her, and she knelt down on the ground and just gave him the biggest hug. And she just said, Jackson, you are so special, and I love you. And gave him a big hug, and he ran back to me. And I said, well, that was really nice. And he said, she says that to me every time.
Oh, that's so cute.
I know. And I thought, like, my dad heart melted for that woman. I have no idea who she is. And she doesn't know who I am. But I loved her so dearly because she took care of my little Jack and loved him when I sent him away from the comfort and safety of home. And I just can't imagine that God feels any differently. Well, he does, right? But
just
that
bigger.
he's
same, but bigger.
Sent us away, and he's the one who knows how to love us. He knows how to take care of us. He knows how to look out after us, and he puts us into the care of other people. And from a dad's point of view, let me tell you how dearly and how personally a father takes it when somebody else looks out after their treasured kids. That's exactly how he feels, right? So that's what life's all about. That's what the world's all about, and that Judgment Day scene is just the Father getting a chance, one by one, to thank everybody for the way that they took care of his children.
So good.
And each other.
Yeah.
Right?
So good.
So, all right.
Yeah, it's a good week.
We love all of those.
Yeah.
And see you in 2 years for Doctrine and Covenants.
Really, see you next week. Okay. We'll just be right in the Gospels, everyone.